Hello, everybody. Uh, Thank you for coming and watching the Levi's stories with Phil Brown. I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro for Phil. I've known Phil for a couple of years now, via his work that he does with LVC. And he came also to the Denny Man last summer in Manchester that we did. And today, basically, me and Phil's had a little bit of a chat, and Phil came up with this idea that instead of talking about the history and when the first Type 2 were made and what happened with Gold Rush and da-da-da-da-da, which he pretty much has to do 3 times a week of his life anyway, he's just going to basically answer the most asked questions that are a little bit more trivial. So it's a bit more light-hearted today from our Levi's stories. If anybody's got any questions, if we could ask you to type them into the chat bar, Phil's more than happy to address them. And other than that, it's pretty much over to Phil, my man Phil. All right, brother.
Thank you, Ben, for that introduction. Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a good afternoon so far. For those of you joining from the UK, thank you for coming in from the sunshine. I know it's difficult at the moment, even for Denham, but thank you for coming along. Hopefully you can hear me nice and clear. There's going to be opportunity to ask questions at the end if you want to, as well as typing them into the box at the bottom. But I'll just do a little brief intro about me, and then I will go into some interesting stuff. So I worked for Levi's for 15 years. I work in the European side of the business. I've worked on Levi's Vintage for a very long time. And I also support and work with Paul in the LVC team, in design and SF, and also with Tracy, the historian. And a lot of my role is product training within Europe and just enthusing people about the brand and some of the things that have gone on before. So like Ben said, I'm not going to start going into all the finer details, but just what I thought would be interesting is some of the questions we get asked the most. So, for example, have we always had an art group in our gene? When was the first product collab we did? When did we first start women's wear? What was our first factory? When was our first TV advertisement? When did we first do a black jean? And all those kind of things. So things that maybe aren't on everyone's radar or you've seen publications about. Obviously, there's a lot of information I can't give out, so I will just keep as simple as possible. There is a presentation that's going to run alongside me showing you the product. So I'm just going to share the screen now. So hopefully that works. If you can see the screen with the presentation, can you just give a thumbs up? That's all I need from anyone once I share it. So share screen. So can you let me, brilliant. Just going to admit a few more people. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to start with is what was our first ever product collab? So some of you might know this and some of you might not know this. So as a brand, our first ever product collab happened in the 60s, in 1965. And we find it appearing in our Western catalogues. And it was with a company called Winchester. And Winchester, their tagline was "the gun that won the West," and they were a well-known rifle company, lever action rifle company, and we did a very nice little range with them. Like I say, the first time we see it pop up was in our 1965 catalogue, and it was also available in 1966. Originals of this product are still very rare and hard to get. Recently in the Levi's San Francisco office, we've had the jacket on display, and the product was made for boys and men, and it consisted of a Sherpa jacket, so it had the fleece lining with the design pattern you see on screen on the outside, and we also had a shirt. So I will just lean behind and you'll be able to see the shirt from the collection. Some of you, if you're an LVC fan or a Levi's Vintage Collection fan, we did reproduce this a few seasons ago, and some cool sundries on the product. You'll probably be able to see on the picture that the casing, the shells, were used on the original shirt as well. So you can see the Winchester bullet. So the plaid was actually pretty famous and already in production by Winchester. So we came up with the styling and we made the product, and Winchester provided the plaid. And we had quite a big campaign around it, and it kind of made sense at the time as a partnership because we were two really well-known Western brands. So this was also at a time when Levi's was still very prominent on the West Coast. There was an emergence of an East Coast consumer base, but really it was the West where the majority of our business was done. So that is the Winchester plaid. You'll probably still be able to get some reproductions online. Originals, good luck. We've got obviously some originals in the archive. Yeah, it's just quite interesting, especially as the brand is collabing quite a lot at the moment and it's building a real great traction. Not many people kind of know really where we started with as a product collab. We did work with Troy Blankets a bit before this in the early part of the 50s and 60s. So a lot of you, if you collect any Levi's product, or you've got any blanket line jackets, whether it's a type 1, a type 2 or a type 3, you'll see that the blanket lining inside, if it's an original, will say that the blanket is provided by Troy. And that's on the inside of the jacket. So it wasn't really a product collab, it was just one of the suppliers at the time that provided a bit of sundries for the product. So that's just a little bit on the first collab from the brand. And then moving on. So we can kind of trace our collabs back really into the 60s. It wasn't really just on product. We'd also kind of collabed with musicians, artists and so on at the time, which was kind of really important to us as well. Just need to admit a few more people. So as well as the Winchester collab, and that being our first product collab, we'd worked with well-known bands at the time that were kind of prominent in our backyard of San Francisco. So working with Jefferson Airplane and Grateful Dead, a lot of the promotional activities we did around them was launching of new product. Because really until kind of the 60s, we'd really just been prominent within denim. So we just started moving around into kind of producing and doing non-denim. So you've probably seen some of the iconic adverts around white Levi's. So we had white Levi's at the time, which we were promoting. And like I say, using Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead, and some real kind of iconic people to really get that message across for us. So as well as product, we were really prominent in quite a lot of the cultural movements of the time. And like I say, you've probably all seen some of these adverts and be familiar with a lot of these bands. And a lot of them kind of originated and came from the West Coast, and specifically San Francisco. And also by working with a lot of these bands and stores within the area, it allowed us to innovate and really start to look at new product, not just necessarily non-denim. So really, like I say, up until the 60s, it was very much the 501 and a straight leg jean that we did. So kind of born out of the 60s was our non-denim, our stay pressed, and also things like our bell bottoms, our flares, our boot cuts. So as well as the white Levi's I've just shown you and the Winchester shirt, we also came up and had product like the bell bottoms that were pretty prominent and were really being worn by a lot of people at the time in San Francisco. So that's a little bit about kind of our product collaboration, and that's mainly around product. On the other screen, you can just kind of, a lot of you, if you're fans of the brand, you've probably seen some of the recreations and the work we've done through the vintage platform. So we've also worked with Jim Phillips, we've worked with Rick Griffin, as well as some of the other bands mentioned on the list there. Damien Hirst was very popular for us as well. And then really, we were very lucky. I mean, we didn't really product place back in the day. We were very lucky that a lot of prominent people and inspirational people decided to wear our product. So like I say, whether it was MC5, whether it was Jimi Hendrix, Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Allman Brothers, all these kind of bands that were really popping up at the time, we were very, very lucky to kind of have them wearing our product. And as you know, it's kind of urban legend now. Especially kind of one of the most iconic images for us was the pair of jeans that Jimi Hendrix was wearing, a clothing set for Woodstock. And they were a custom made pair of flares by Levi's. that were actually bought and purchased in San Francisco. So again, we've been very lucky with the kind of people who've worn our product, and we definitely don't take it for granted. So that's just a little bit about the product collaboration. At the end, there will be time to revisit some of this. So people who've joined a bit late, if you want to see that first product, the Winchester shirt and the Winchester jacket, I can show it at the end. So don't worry if you've just missed out on seeing that. So moving on, this is always an interesting topic and something we get asked about quite a lot, and there's definitely varied opinions on this, but we always do get asked, what has been the ever-present on our jean, on our overall? What's always been there? Is it the arcuate? Is it the back patch? Is it the rivet? Is it the cinch back? What is it? So we've seen examples of our original overall without the arcuate on the back pocket. And again, if you're a fan of the Levi's Vintage Collection in 2013, we recreated that jean without an arcuate. The stuff that will obviously come to light at a later date around some of the early jeans that are in our possession and what is out there at the moment. But the arcuate hasn't always been on the back pocket of the jean, of the Levi's overall. There's a couple of kind of reasons we not think for this, that we know about this. So when the patent was applied for by Jacob Davis and Levi Strauss in 1872, it wasn't authorized or granted straight away. Levi's and Jacob Davis had to do a bit of work to convince them that this riveting process was new to Levi's and was something that was unique. So while the application was put in, Jacob Strauss did continue to make overalls with fabric supplied by Levi until the patent was granted. These are kind of what in-house we term kind of a ghost jean, and definitely a holy grail of what we kind of search for and what we look for. And it's kind of like the Da Vinci Code of the hunt. But if we could ever find one of these overalls that were produced in that period before the patent was granted, we'd probably be a lot richer than we actually are. But yeah, the arcuate hasn't actually always been on our original overall. The ever-present has been the back patch. The back patch has always been there. So you'll probably see from the image, it's in the center, just behind the cinch. That has always been on our garment. I won't get too geeky or geek out because, again, I don't have the answers to everything. And the good thing about Levi's is that there's no right or wrong answer. Everyone's got a great opinion, and I wasn't around in 1873, so I cannot categorically say what was right or what was wrong. It's just from information we've been able to piece together through dealing with vintage collectors, what we currently have in our archive or archives we have within the business. But yeah, we have seen a jean without the arcuate on the back. So yeah, that's one of the pictures there. Some of our earlier jeans, as you've probably seen, I've got some here. So we've got the 501, we've got the oldest. Again, unfortunately, this is not always the greatest. It comes across the greatest when we show you on screen. But like I say, we're fully open. So once our offices are fully operational and back and running, we're more than happy for you to come and see me and have a look at some of our product in the flesh and kind of show you some of the great stuff we have in our archive. But that's just a question we get all the time. Has the arcuate always been there? And as part of my role, before the lockdown happened, I've been doing some extensive research into the arcuate and kind of why we first used it and why we first started. And Ben and I were having a chat just before we got onto this, kind of what the origins were behind it. We've seen a lot of Jewish symbols that look like the arcuate. We've seen a lot of old pickaxes from the Silver Rush and Gold Rush that look like an arcuate. You've probably all heard the urban myth about it being the eagle representing freedom, because Levi Strauss, through the struggles he had, wanted to create a brand that was applicable to everyone. So there's quite a lot of stories and urban myths around it, and it's definitely something that we're really looking into to kind of have a look at what is fact and what's fictional. But like I say, we'll never know. So that's just a bit about the arcuate. And another one that we do get asked quite a bit is, well, what was our most affordable jean? What was the cheapest product that Levi's ever produced? So a lot of people think that the 201 was our most affordable jean at the time, or overall, as we called it back then. What we did have in the range was the 3 series, the 300 series. And as part of that collection, we had a jean that was the 333. We did have some jackets that went alongside this, but from a fabric point of view, it was a 333 that was the cheapest that we produced. So we knew that people of the time really respected Levi's and wanted to wear it for their work, but didn't quite have the money or funds to buy our top grade product, which was the 501, and sometimes not even the 201. So we introduced the 333. I have a pair of 333s here. So the 333 was a very simplistic design. It was made from the Amaseg mill. That was one of our earliest mills that we started working with. That was based in New Hampshire. It's got a very similar back patch to what you've probably seen on the 201, but this time with the number 3 grade fabric. Again, there's no arcuate on the back pocket. So like I say, not all, we'll get into the red tab and the back patch a little bit later, but not all Levi's product have adorned the red tab or even an arcuate. And the 300 series with the bottoms and the tops were also garments that didn't have the arcuate on the back. Lovely, lovely rich indigo. It was a natural dye at the time, simplistic on the front design. So belt loops hadn't been introduced at the time, so it's just the suspenders that kept it up. But it's an absolutely lovely jean. And it's quite ironic that this was one of our cheapest products we produced at the time, but if we come across a real one now, we sometimes end up, or you will end up paying more than a pair of 501s that are our highest grade. So it's a lovely, lovely piece. Really baggy, really boxy. And there's a couple of original ones that we do have within in the archive. But not the 200 series, it was the 333. It didn't actually last in the range for very long. It came into production around about 1910, 1911 and stayed in until about 1916. So it hasn't been around long, or that's kind of the records we have on the garment. Again, with Levi's and having such a rich and long history, there's new stuff that comes to light every day. And we won't profess to have all the answers because, as you probably read and see, we get new things every day. We get new emails, we get new letters, we get new things found. So who knows, there could be something out there that we don't quite know about. But the 333 at the moment is our cheapest grade product we had. And we've just got catalogues from kind of 1910, 1911 that show that. Also, quite interestingly, in the 1910 catalogue is the first time we see the black jean popping up for us as well, or black denim. But we'll save that story for another time. So, moving on. Hopefully you'll be able to see the screen with the 200 series. So we also get a lot of questions about the 200 series and what was the 201 and what was it and why did you introduce it. So again, a lot of you guys know about it and about the 200 series and the 201. The 201 was a cheaper grade fabric and denim to what we produced with the 501. And again, similar to the 300 series, we knew a lot of people couldn't afford the 501. So we wanted to create a collection or a range that kind of catered for every working man. Predominantly, again, on the West Coast. This was kind of before we started shifting and working more with consumers kind of in the middle and on the East Coast of the business, of the country. So you've got the 201 that a lot of you have all seen. So even on the reproductions we've done within LVC, we don't have the 201 in at the moment, but it's asked a lot. We get asked quite a lot to put it back into the collection. Also, when we produced it with Valencia Street, so Valencia Street was the first factory that we built after the earthquake and subsequent fire, and they were in production from 1906 to 2002. In the early days of Levi's Vintage, they reproduced a lot of the collection with us, with denim finishing and fabrication from Bart Seitz, who still works with the business. And the 201 reproduction done by Valencia Street is still one of the most sought after denims. But the 200 series, you've probably all seen. It's an absolutely amazing jean, boxy, very similar in detailing to the 333, especially with the back patch. I've got a couple of versions here. It's an absolutely amazing jean. It was, again, it's the selvage on it. On the reproduction, you'll probably see a lot of selvage with the blue line selvage running through it. The originals had just a white selvage. The denim was from the Amaseg mill. It was introduced around about 1890, so the similar time as the 501. And the last catalogue and line book we've seen with the 201 or the 200 series pop up in is in 1943. So right during the middle of the Second World War. That's the last catalogue we've seen, and we believe that the 200 series existed. Again, who knows if what a catalogue or anything is found with anything otherwise, but we believe it definitely ended around the Second World War, and as we kind of moved into a different method and way of producing garments after that, that period. But yeah, the 200 series was our cheaper version of the 501. But again, an absolutely amazing jean, and sometimes on the market and people we deal with, it's a lot more to buy than a 501. And another one we get asked, another question is, well, what was our first factory? How did Levi start producing when the demand was there and you'd received your patent and you went about your business? How did it all get started? So in the early days, when we were making product, seamstresses were making it within their homes and within their houses. We weren't geared up. We didn't have a massive factory. There wasn't massive production like we have today. It was made by people within their houses, made predominantly, if not 100% by women. Jacob Davis oversaw this production because originally with the business being on the East Coast and us having headquarters there, a lot of this stuff was decided and sorted out on the East Coast by Levi's brothers, and production was done there, and subcontracting and finding people to make product. So Levi and the company decided that instead of doing that, we should move production to the West Coast, still get people making it in their houses, but have that production on the West Coast and not have that lag in it getting delivered. But really demand was pretty high within the first couple of months of producing this copper riveted overall, that the business thought we really need everyone in one place. We need to kind of have a bit of a better operation. So you'll probably see on the screen just some early images of what the first factory looked like. I've done a little pin drop on the screen, if you can see, of our hometown of San Francisco. And the first factory employed just over 60 women. They were paid $3 for the production. And it was really on the annex of Market Street and Fremont Street, where this first factory was. And the product they were producing, so from day one, we were producing jackets and we were producing overalls. And they were made in off-white, they were made in duck fabric, and they were also made in denim. As we all know, denim went on to be the most favourite colour and most popular colour, but we were producing 3 colourways at the time in the early days. So, if you're not familiar, here's one of the duck cotton pieces from the early period. So the rivets are stamped with 1873. This wasn't until a lot later when that expired that was removed from the rivet. And then, as explained earlier, you've got our early back patch. So this was all text and writing. The 2-horse logo hadn't been devised yet. I'll talk about the 2-horse logo a little bit later. But one of the main reasons that that was removed is because, especially in California, and California only became a state in 1850. So there were still a lot of Spanish speaking people in the region. A lot of people couldn't really understand what the hell we were talking about on our back patch here. So really, we had to kind of design something that was applicable to everyone, but I'll come on to that a bit later. But this is an early example of a duck cotton fabric, or a piece that we were producing at the time from one of our early factories. And we've got an off-white version of that as well in the archive, as well as some of the denim pieces. Amazing piece. It's amazing to think that something this old you could put on today and kind of wear out in the street and you wouldn't look out of place. And then, as I mentioned, jackets as well as overalls were being produced. And a lot of you have probably seen the recreations on the Levi's vintage range that we do for the triple pleat blouse. And we were producing jackets the same, if not very similar to this at the time as well. Simplistic in design, very light. They're very high cut at the back, because if you think of the time, overalls were worn very high. They were worn near the navel or pretty high-waisted. That's how people preferred to wear their garments during the day, especially as they worked in mines and wore them over kind of long johns or even suits. That's why this is cut quite short. A lot of people have complained, well, why is the rise so high on the back? It's because if you look at some of our early edition jeans, they sit very high on the back. If you wear them with a jean made in the 90s or 2000s, there's going to be a big gap. So that's just a little bit about our first factory. And then something we get asked about again also is women's wear. When did we start women's wear? What was the first product? So we moved into women's wear in 1918. You'll be able to see the dates on the screen there. We first patented our women's product on April the 9th, 1918. And it was on a garment called Freedom Alls. It didn't last long in the range. It was only in for a year. But this is when kind of women really started moving into kind of not necessarily the war effort, but we're helping out on ranches and moving away from being in the home and working and supporting that war effort. I'm lucky enough to have a piece with me today, the Freedom All. So hopefully you can see this on screen, but it's a one-piece tunic. It might not look the most flattering, but it really was cutting edge at the time. It's hard to kind of get it across on screen, but it's an absolutely amazing garment and piece that we had. But it wasn't in the range for very long as a brand, only a year. But Freedom All was the first garment that we introduced for women. Really where it kind of started to really kick off for us was in the mid-30s, in 1934, when we moved into producing overalls, bottoms, jeans, whatever you want to call them, for women. Originally, it was for women who worked on the West. So again, ranch hands, wives of farmers who needed a durable product to do their work in. It was then romanticized and adopted by people who would come across from the East Coast to kind of live that rodeo lifestyle. But really, in our catalogues and our advertisements and text we've seen at the time, it was introduced for the working women of ranches. And it was the 701. It's kind of like the female version of the 501. So I have got a 701 here. Again, it probably won't come across the greatest on screen. Again, all of you are into your denim. You've probably seen amazing kind of famous people like Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn, and so on wearing this product. It's really, really cool and was really kind of our foray into women's wear as a fashion garment. Something a lot of people might not know is that we produced a range called Tropical Togs as well in the 30s. And this was kind of a more sporty range of women's wear. And this was again for women who were kind of into their leisure pursuits and activities. So women who kind of rode motorbikes or wanted something that wasn't as rigid or hard to wear originally or breaking in as denim was at the time. But Tropical Togs is a part of the women's wear collection that we introduced and had in the 30s. It didn't last too long, but it's something people aren't maybe aware of, that it was a women's wear product that we did, and we've got some examples of that in the archive. And they're really, really cool pieces. Probably if you just Google Tropical Togs or even have a look on Pinterest, you can see some of the product. And then over the years, we evolved women's wear and we moved into kind of Orange Tab. We've also had Miss Levi's, we had Levi's for gals. So Miss Levi basically was the European version of Levi's for gals. So Levi's for gals was the American name for women's wear. In Europe, we called it Miss Levi. And then eventually they kind of both morphed together and just became known as Levi's women's wear. But on screen here for you, I've got a dead stock version of a Miss Levi piece, black tab, gold writing, big E, and you've got the Miss Levi label in the back. Super high-waisted flare, one pocket on the back, absolutely amazing piece. Something that's pretty old but could be worn today and you wouldn't look out of place. So that's kind of like just a little brief history of women's wear. And then at the time, up until 1981, women had to make do if they weren't wearing a 701 with borrowing or wearing a men's 501. 1981 is when we specifically did a women's 501. Some of you might have seen the famous advert, the Travis one, if you've seen that movie, with the advertising around it. But I've got a pair here. This is an original 501 from 1981, the year we brought it out for women. And again, such a cool piece. especially for something that's kind of more or less 40 years old. The wear on it's absolutely stunning. And again, something you could wear out today and just slip $1 million in. So that's just a women's 501 from 1981. And moving on. First TV commercial. So there's a lot of hoo-ha around when we first did a TV commercial. So originally we had put in publications and mentioned kind of with our 1966 501 that was the first time that we did a TV commercial. We actually first started doing a TV commercial in 1965. So you can see on the screen some of the documents we've got from the archive and some of the text we've got from the marketing manager at the time. So the first adverts we ran with on TV were in 1965, and they were to promote our new range, the Stay Pressed White Levi's. So we introduced Stay Pressed in 1964. A lot of you are probably familiar with Stay Pressed. So I've got a couple of dead stock ones here, not the white ones, but I've got a black one here, also known as Trim Cups. This is a dead stock version one from the year we brought it out in 1964. Still got the original ticketing on, and it was $7 at the time, so pretty cheap. And then there's just a women's dead stock one as well, which is pretty cool. But our first advertisements were ran in 1965, and they were to promote the new Levi's white Stay Pressed collection. And you can just see on the screen as well, just some of the internal adverts we have when we're researching this, and some of the text we've got. And we also ran an advert in Playboy magazine that year as well, which was quite interesting, around white Levi's. And really, this is when we're really kind of trying to penetrate, mind the pun, kind of the East Coast consumer, and really kind of target a new market with it. But yeah, first TV commercial from Levi's was 1965. And then moving on, another question we get asked a lot, well, did Levi's have a military contract? What was your involvement during the wars? What did you do? Did you make anything? So you can kind of see on the text there that we do have records of American soldiers during World War I repurposing Levi's products for the war efforts. So at the time, fabric and stuff was hard to get hold of, and not all of the time was apparel replaced if they'd damaged it or ruined it. So luckily for us, we had khaki product in our range under the Levi Strauss make, and you'll see on screen that soldiers, US soldiers, repurposed some of this product and used it for active service. And we've got a couple of examples within the San Francisco archive of this. You'll be able to see one of the adverts on the screen as well from one of our catalogues about the Levi Strauss make. Very durable, very tough, maybe not as warm as denim, so probably suitable for warmer climates. And this was kind of used for the war effort by soldiers and servicemen. So we don't have any official records of any major contracts during the war period. We do have info suggesting that garments were used in the Spanish-American War. And also an interesting fact as well, that in the early days, a lot of people and children worked in the mills where we made our products, so either in Amaseg or Cone. As the machines and the shutters, and it was very loud with all the machinery going on, a lot of people who worked there had to learn how to lip read. So by learning these skills, a lot of people within our factories were repurposed or used for the war efforts in helping American intelligence and some British intelligence on lip reading when they were put behind enemy lines, because they had learned how to lip read when they'd worked in Amaseg or Cone mills, and the machinery was so loud that they were able to communicate across large factory halls and understand what was going on. And at the time, we thought this was a great asset to be put behind the enemy lines, or to spy, or to kind of lip read what the enemy is saying. So that's quite an interesting fact about some of our involvement within the war period. And then you'll see at the bottom what's quite common knowledge is that we had quite a few major factories in California, but due to wartime demand, we made special parkas for soldiers based up on in Alaska and the northern part of America. So that's just a little bit of history around wartime and our involvement there. And then finally, to wrap things up, it's just a little brief information on the red tab and back patch. So we're extensively doing research on this, and you've probably seen recently we've done a lot of playful stuff around the back patch and the red tab, and it's turned up in so many different ways, and it's just something we're being a little bit more playful with now, and it's something that we never touched before, and how dare you do anything with that. But the red tab, as you probably all know, was introduced in 1936. You'll see on the screen a picture of Chris Lucia, the sales manager at the time, who was based on the West Coast. He's the gentleman with glasses. He was the sales manager who, like I say, worked on the West Coast. He worked with Joe Frank, who was one of our longest ever salespeople. And actually between them, a lot of the information that Joe Frank fed back is that a lot of brands were copying or making product very similar to Levi's, and that we really needed to kind of make our product stand out a little bit more within stores, hardware stores and stuff. And Joe Frank was a person who, as a salesperson, traveled extensively across the West Coast. And early documents show a lot of correspondence between him and his sales manager, Chris Lucia, on the need for branding to be a little bit stronger. So Chris Lucia came up with the idea to put that small tab on the back of our pocket. And like I say, the rest is kind of really history, and that's kind of the origins of the red tab. Something that we're researching at the moment from a brand point of view. And you'll probably see a lot of stuff that we've released recently on kind of a play around with that. Also, the back patch. So the back patch has always been on the back of our garments. You've seen the early edition with the text and the writing, and then the famous one is the 2-horse logo. So the invention of this, with a lot of ideas in the early days, a lot of innovation came with inside the business. So alongside Levi Strauss, the Stern family, were a major part of the business and took over the running of the business once Levi Strauss died. And their family are credited with a lot of product innovations from the brand. So the Sterns, one of the Stern family, came up with the idea of the back patch with the 2-horse logo that was designed and put into production in 1886. So it was really quite interesting when we look at the archives and our information. Really, for the first 40, 50 years of production, 99.9% of the ideas were generated by the Sterns, Levi Strauss or Jacob Davis. So a select and small group of people. Really, what they designed and did stood the test of time. And again, the back patch, alongside the red tab and the archive, is something that's extensively being researched and had a look into at the moment. And you can kind of see some of the imagery and stuff we have from the archive on the back there. But that's it from me. I won't keep you too long. Like I say, especially the guys in the UK who've got 25-degree heat outside. That's just a bit of information, some questions we get asked a lot about Levi. So hopefully you found it interesting or learned one thing new. But if there's any questions, I don't know if Ben's going to host, or if you want to type in the box, or if you just want to shout out, or if you want to email, or whatever.
Phil, thank you very much for your time. Super interesting as always, brother. There is some questions come in. Do you want me to read them out to you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So this one's from Emma Pritchard, and she says, Phil, how often do the Levi's team source and use antique, very old jean examples? I'm guessing for modern products. And how do you source these?
The stuff that's bought more or less every day, whether it's from the design team, whether it's for the archive purposes, whether it's for training purposes. And in my role, a lot of it has involved searching and finding original product out in the marketplace. Some stuff is pretty unattainable. So a lot of the stuff kind of before 1900 and also stuff before the Second World War is very expensive and very hard to find. But especially with some of the modern stories and where we're going as a brand, we're definitely looking at stories from the 70s, 80s and 90s. So this stuff is a little bit more easy to get hold of. Some of you might have originals from that period, but stuff is sourced and bought every day. And there's definitely stuff offered to the brand daily. Some great stuff, some stuff that we probably wouldn't take as well, but we have a lot of product. But yeah, it's on a daily basis that stuff's bought. And like I say, there's certain things that we'll go after. We do have a lot. So, for example, a Type 3 denim jacket, there's hundreds we have. A Type 1, a Type 2. There's plenty of that kind of stuff we have, whether it's stay pressed, 201s. There's quite a lot of stuff we do have. But there's always new stuff that we're searching for. And like I say, there's probably stuff out there we don't even know we made. And someone could drop us an email on Monday and say, look, in this ghost town in America, I found what I believe is the first ever jean. Or I found, for example, a Harrington jacket. Maybe you were the first people to do a Harrington jacket, not this brand. We don't know. So there's always new stuff that comes to light, and there's some amazing stuff.
So, so basically, you use what you can when you can. You use it all the time, technically.
You can, and you can get inspiration from anything. Like a lot of the guys may be listing here. I mean, there's probably people who design, and you can find inspiration in some amazing places. It could be a fairly innocuous jean, maybe a jean we've done from the early 2000s, but has amazing fade or wear on, and you just think, well, actually, that looks really cool. It's maybe not a vintage piece, but that wash would look great if it's applied to a 1950s 501. So inspiration can come from anywhere, and it's kind of really what you're interested in and what you kind of really like. Really, it's denim is a bit like leather or a good pair of boots. They look better when they're kind of broken in, and that breaking in process is down to you. And maybe the wear I would achieve in a jean is different to you. If we both took the same 501 and never washed them from a year, they'd both look a lot different. But it's all down to kind of what you're searching for and what you're looking for at the time.
We've got quite an interesting. It's a question regards price, and I'm going to take it one step further. So, whereas a 501 now from a Levi's store, Phil, might cost 90 quid, you reckon?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and was that always the same back in the day? Has that price always sort of been the same? You know, £90 to an average man now, was that the same 100 years ago, for example?
No, I mean, as we briefly touched on there, we kind of had a grading process to denim, but it really was workwear back then. So it's kind of, I suppose, if you went and bought workwear now, if you went to B&Q or Homebase, it's going to be cheap, isn't it? So it's kind of different.
Yeah.
It's kind of different kind of marketplaces, because back then when we were producing denim, it was workwear, whereas there was product that was produced for fashion purposes, and now the brand is a fashion brand, not necessarily a workwear brand. So if you're comparing it back then, a suit would be a lot more than a pair of Levi's. But I suppose things change, don't they? If you went and bought a BMW 20 years ago, it would be more expensive now, wouldn't it?
Yeah. We've got a question from our friend Mohsin. Well, it's more of a request than a question. It says, please tell everyone about Milton Grunblin, father of the concealed rivet. Sweet or did the tug of war concept before Levi's?
Everyone's done a tug of war. So, there's many brands that have, and people who've done a tug of war. So, it's...
Who's Milton Grunblin? Milton Grunblin? Who's Milton Grunblin?
There's so we've got a couple of letters in the archive of people who've put our product to test. So kind of when we did the Two Horse logo and we brought it out into the marketplace, we've got letters from a guy in Hawaii who tested this out in his store with people. We've got people on the West Coast who tested this out. Some people were successful and the jeans ripped straight away. They were pulled apart by horses, they were pulled apart by donkeys, by cars, whatever at the time. So there is a lot of stories about people testing our garments, and even some of the amazing Japanese and repro brands out there at the moment have done kind of monkeys around pulling the jeans apart and done kind of a play on that, which is really cool and refreshing to see. But yeah, it's there's a lot of there's actually something I can't speak on about at the moment, but there's something we're bringing out a bit in relation to that question just asked around that. So I would like to answer that. Maybe I can do it in personal, but there's something we're doing.
I'd like, we should wait for that, because I'm going to put you both on spot now. Me, you, Phil, and you, Mohsin, will do a Zoom call sometime in the not
Yeah.
distant future where we can take the subject in other, we can take the conversation in other ways. And I think that.
Yeah, no, I'd love to answer everything, but for those of you who've worked for a big corporation, there's things. I don't have a PR person sitting in the corner, but it's not far off.
We've got.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
Can I ask something? Sorry, Phil, you did a fantastic job, by the way. I didn't mean to hijack anything. You've done an amazing job. I've done a lot of research on Milton like Granville. That's why I was asking. He's actually a factory worker who came up with the concealed like rivet. So I found his patent and his name's on it. So that's why I asked the question, because I didn't know much more about him, and I found a picture of him from an old catalogue as well. And I teach his denim history, and I thought I'll just ask you, but don't worry if you don't want to answer. It's all good.
No worries. It's there's certain things we can say and we can't say about our history, and as you probably well know, with a brand like Levi's, and we try and be transparent as possible. And the good thing about Levi's is we are a brand. If we don't always have the right answer, we will always be open and transparent about it, even if it's like something about sustainability. We're not there yet, but at least we're ready to have a conversation about it. And we have information in the archive that goes with that and goes against that. But
okay.
So it's something, without saying we're doing something, that's something to keep an eye on. That will be coming in 2021.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time as well.
No worries. It's great, and it's interesting to do something like this from your house. I have many archival pieces, but as you can imagine, a lot of it is in San Francisco or in an archive we have elsewhere in the country. But it's good to speak and engage with people, because as you can imagine, everyone has an opinion on Levi's, and there's no right or wrong answer to Levi's, because I wasn't around in 1873. So we're always piecing things together, and it is like the Da Vinci Code. It is like the Great Hunt, and for example, we've got new stuff coming in next week, and we're like, wow, I didn't even know we did that. Everyone said, like we mentioned before, everyone's like, oh, the arcuate, that's always been on the jean, hasn't it? No. And just things like that. There's always kind of great questions and information and nuggets we're getting, and I'm no denim expert. I just know about the history of the brand.
This will make a really good conversation between maybe me, Phil, Martin, and even Amanda.
Yeah, sorry if it's boring, everyone. This is kind of like a conversation I had with Paul.
I want to end it up. I want to end it with a bit more information about Phil. That's been good enough to come on and spend his Sunday afternoon talking.
Well, basically, I'm the third leg of Paul and Tracy. So whenever Paul and Tracy don't want to do anything, they just cart me out. But we work very closely together and have numerous conversations like this. And just 3 hours down the line, we've not actually decided on that. Come up with it.
We have got questions for you, Phil, and one of them is from Emma. What is your favourite vintage jean in your personal collection?
Favourite one for me is I have a pair from the 50s, and it's my favourite pair that I have got. So from bottoms, it's from a 50s 501. It's probably from about 1955. And then the other piece I have got is a Type 3 denim jacket that my dad used to wear, and he wore it when he was on his bike. It looks absolutely amazing. Something I'm a little bit scared to wear now, because I'd love to pass it down through my family. But like I said before, it doesn't have to be the eldest or most expensive. It's just kind of what's personal to you. But it's a biggie one. It's from the early edition collection. It's a 557, which is one of the earliest Type 3s we did. The 557, I think it's 1961, pre-shrunk. And he actually bought it to go with his 551Zs, which my mum still believes we have somewhere, but she doesn't know where. If she does find them, I'm very interested. Somebody's
just commented saying, well, it's Emma again, just saying, is that jacket what started your love of Levi's?
Potentially, it could be. Seeing all the old pictures of my dad wearing denim and wearing Levi's, probably was. I mean, I've worked for this. This is my 16th year at Levi's. Been lucky enough to work all over with the brand in product development, merchandising, design, product training, working in stores, working in the factories, working in San Francisco, working in Europe. Bit of a dog's body. Probably after lockdown, I'll be the cleaner. It's yeah, they keep you on your toes, that's for sure. And hopefully we emerge a super strong brand. That I'm sure we will. And there's always new initiatives, and there's always a varied opinion on Levi's. Some people love it, some people hate it. But it's yeah, it's amazing the amount of questions we get, like, how dare you don't use Cone Mills anymore? How dare you use Japanese denim and all that kind of stuff? And we used Japanese denim in the early editions of LVC when we introduced it, when Bart Seitz was designing it and doing the washing procedures, and it was an amazing product, and no one said anything back then. And it's an amazing product, and this call is too short to go into the intricacies of Cone Mills, and I know a lot of your viewers on here have been to Cone Mills and seen the operation they have, and if you've been, you'll understand kind of. And we're seeing some great production elsewhere in the country, and we used to make the 501 in the UK, up in Scotland, and some of the 501s they were making were absolutely phenomenal. They weren't salvaged, but they were absolutely amazing. And in future collections, we might see some of this product come back, and we just won't be producing as much as we did before, because especially with what's going on, we just need to be careful about what we're doing and waste and consumption. But it's a great thing about Levi's. You've got such a varied opinion, and no one's ever right or wrong. It's just good to hear many people's views, and it's just good to have a good chat about it. And same with Tracy and Paul. They will never tell anyone who's wrong, and they'll never say if anyone's right. It's your opinion, because, like I say, Tracy wasn't around in 1873 either, nor was Lynn Downey, who I used to work with. We can just piece together what we get in. And like I say, I could give you some information today. I have an email tomorrow and it tells me otherwise. But that's the great thing about working with Levi's. You're constantly learning and evolving. So, yeah.
What is, again, another question for Phil as opposed to for Levi's. I've asked this question to a few people today, so I'll ask you now. What's your favourite denim book? You know, for people that are listening, that might be, you know, looking for a coffee table book, if you like. What have you, you know, what have you got on your shelf that you think, yeah, that learnt me a lot?
I think, like with a lot of the work that's done in the archive, you piece a lot together. So you read something by someone, and then you look at something else by someone, and sometimes you need to come to that decision yourself. And it's hard, because even us, we're guilty. We've said we did something, well, we did that in 1953, when another Levi book says, oh, we did that in 1954. I've seen stuff like on the red tab, oh, you double-sided the red tab in 1952, 53, 54, 55, and 56. I've seen publications with all those dates in. So it's kind of really doing a bit of investigative work yourself, and kind of what you've been trained in. So whether you're trained as an archivist, a historian, or a denim head. And I'll be the first to admit that I don't know the intricacies that much of how you make a pair of jeans. I'm not an expert. I'm not a designer. But the background is history and being an archivist. So that's the approach I take it. And then Paul, who some of you might know, Paul O'Neill, is designer, and he will come with a different opinion. Very talented, experienced, brilliant designer, great inspiration on seasonal stories. And then you'll Tracy, who comes with a different opinion. And then we have Stacia, who worked in the archive, and Lynn, and everyone brings a different angle. And then you have head of merchandising, head of product, and we all kind of share an opinion. But there's many great books out there. I mean, there's great stuff done by Paul Trinker, Graham Marsh, have written some amazing stuff on Levi's. And there's some books that aren't even that famous. I can't remember the author, but there's a book I've got from the 80s. And some of the information in there is amazing. But even speaking today, I've seen 3 books that say our first factory was somewhere else. It's very close. Market Street and Fremont Street is a Jones one or the other, but we've seen our first factory supposedly on 6 places on that street. So yeah, it's just, this is the great thing about Levi's. We can have these stories and these debates for days to come, but there's loads of great stuff out there, and like machine. has shared some books on his site, and all of them are good. You can learn, if you've learned one thing from one of them, you've learned something. That's the thing, really, isn't it? You can learn from everyone. So it's, yeah, there isn't one book I can say. That's a very long way of saying it. But of course, the best book to read is Lynn Downey's.
Very cool.
Lynn started the archive, so who better? She worked there for over 30 years, so she is, some of the stories that she's got and some of the stuff she's seen is amazing. But yeah, I think some of the stuff I do is getting to meet interesting people. So whether it's meeting Eric Clapton and hearing about when he wore Levi's jeans with cream, that's an amazing story, and some of the stuff he's got. Or recently speaking to a roadie with Led Zeppelin and looking at some of the jeans that Peter Grant, the manager, wore, Levi's jeans from that he had, pair of Stay Pressed that John Bonham had. There's just so much stuff that I mean, you'll probably see, again, a lot of you into vintage, you'll see amazing stuff from people selling stuff. Luckily, we've got a real great back catalogue of actually people who wore it. So acquiring jeans that Bob Dylan wore, and then it's the story behind that we're more interested in. Because yeah, you can buy a 501 from the 50s, and great, you can pay £1,000 for it. But it's kind of really finding the story behind that and who wore it. And
who decides that story for LBC, Phil? Like, who's the team? Because obviously every time you do a season, it's based on a theme, whether it's space, Bob Dylan, you know, so on and so forth. How do you come together as a team to make that decision? And then once you've made that decision, where do you go from there?
I mean, Paul O'Neill is the head designer for Levi's Vintage Collection, and Paul's worked for the brand for just over 10 years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the seasonal inspiration will start with Paul. Mm-hmm. Paul has an assistant designer and there's an assistant team. But a lot of the stuff that you do within Levi's is cross-functional. So whether it needs to take a bit of inspiration from what's going to appear in the mainline range, to also certain subcultures. Levi's, like I mentioned before, are very lucky to be part of a lot of different subcultures throughout the years. And some of the stories that have been played on recently are more recent subcultures. So whether it's 60s, whether it's 70s, whether it's the post-punk movement, and so on. The good thing is we can go from the 1980s to the 1930s, and we can tell that story. And there's always something we can choose. You will go into the archive, and again, some of you who've maybe been into the archive in San Francisco, it's like a labyrinth. There's so many things you can pick up and go, wow, I didn't know we did that. Or we could do a seasonal story just around Stay Pressed and not put anything else in the range. We could do a seasonal story around customization, punks. And we've seen, not a collection, but it's probably quite relevant for the moment, around Black Panthers. And we've seen some of the early documentation that we had with them and a contract from them to supply them with black 501s. So there's so many cool stories we can do. And it's, well, I won't confess, and nor will Tracy or the others, that we are denim nerds. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. It's just trying to get across cool seasonal stories and stuff that's relevant and cool to people and people find interesting. And yeah, the people might pick faults in what we do from a product point of view, but it's a seasonal story that we try and get across. And I think that's what people like, and that's what makes us different. We can tell a seasonal story, whereas a lot of other brands out there, you produce a rigid jean, but so do 100 other people. And yours might be better than Levi's, or you think that. But you can't actually get a jean from 1930 and show John Wayne wearing it. Or you can't get something with, like I say, Jimi Hendrix wearing it, or Janis Joplin, or someone like that. And luckily we have that, and that's something that we play on, and we try and bring it to life and recreate what we have. But fashion is fashion. It evolves very quickly, and maybe what we design for next season is out of date tomorrow. Who knows? It's denim. A lot of people have a lot of opinions.
Mm-hmm. Very true, very true. I think we're going to have to wrap it up, Phil, simply because we've got Blueprint Amsterdam going live.
Yeah, sure. They're good
now. Has anybody got any last minute questions they want to fire at Phil, Marcin? Or
thank you, Phil, for your time. You were amazing.
No worries. And if anyone wants to get in contact or come and see me in our little archive space we have, don't hesitate to drop me a line. I can share my details, my email address, and whatever, because there's some exciting stuff going on, and hopefully at the end of this year with the brand,
amazing
archives and so on.
I'll hook you two up together.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I want to share some things I found for Phil. He obviously might know it, but it's interesting.
No, definitely, it's great to hear stories from anyone, and we can learn what I've learned doing this job for 15 years. It's kind of, if I think 10 years ago, I thought I knew that, and then now it's like, and you'll probably know from the early days from doing LVC. We used to do a diamond arcuate in the 201. How wrong were we back then?
That's right. Yeah. I've seen loads of little things like that. Like even but that's what it is. We're all learning still. That's what's brilliant about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, enjoy your afternoon, everyone. Enjoy the sun if you're in the UK, and have a great rest of your weekend.
Yeah, and Ben, make sure you hook us up. Thank you so much.
We're going to do a 3-way Zoom. Anyway, I'm going to do 2-way, if that's all right. Phil, sorry, and I'm saying this publicly, because I've made you the host, I'm not sure if the video will download to your computer or mine when you stop. So just let me know afterwards, bud, if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries. I'll let you know.
Much appreciated. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Who wins the meeting, Phil? Me or you? That's interesting.
I know, because with work we use Teams a lot. We don't really use Zoom at work, but I presume I can still got 7 participants.
Yeah, they'll still be able to hear us for definite. I'm just wondering how we cancel the meeting because I've switched host. I've made you the host. Usually I just get a thing that says leave the meeting.
Can you switch back to you being the host, or is that maybe I can make you the host again? I could try that.
Yeah, try it, and then I can cancel it. And obviously we'll cut all these bits out of the edit. Hi, Rob. I know you can't. I can't see you, but hi anyway.
But I can remove people though.
Yeah, that might help.
Sorry, guys. I'd love to have you all on, but I need to remove some people.
Yeah.
So that's just 2 of us now.
Yes. So we're just back to us. Right. Okay. It's not basically, Phil. It's not giving me the option to. I can leave, but I can't end the meeting for all. You're the only person that can do that, and I think then the audio is going to download to your computer.
So does it download just the audio or the actual video as well?
It's the whole thing.
Okay.
And it's video. And what it'll do is it'll say the meeting is now downloading to your computer, and then it'll just send it into your recent downloads, and I just need a copy. If we have to put you on the best of video. Like, am I allowed to share this on YouTube and stuff like that, this conversation?
Yeah, that should be fine. It's,
we're just looking to do a best of, Phil, that's all. So it's
that's cool.
3 minutes or 30 minutes, there's 24 hours worth of entertainment here. We're just going to and do a best of. This is done really well. This is going really well. Like the next time round we do it, although it's been brilliant this time, everybody's been their own host and we've done it like this. We'll basically do it all from his own website, I think, next time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And if anyone gets in contact with you who needs my details, feel free to share with them my.
Are you sure? Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. My email address, not mobile, but email address for sure.
Yeah. I'll get me you and Mohsin on a chat.
Yeah.
Because we have to keep this a bit light-hearted. Because
that's it. And we could denim geek out, and I think when it's just the 3 of us, I know who I'm speaking to, because in some of the stuff asked, I have the corporate answer, the real answer, and
of course.
You never know who's watching or who's recording.
No. So what I'll do is I'll set me, you, and Mohsin in a WhatsApp group, if that's all right. And then
put some WhatsApp group for sure.
Yeah, and then we'll arrange another Zoom. We can just have 3 of us. And we'll just have a really good chat. And there's no time limit. There's nobody else watching. There's just us involved. So if anybody says, "Oh, I can't do," it gets took out.
I trust you guys. So if there's just 3 of us, it's easiest. So if anything gets leaked, there's only 2 of you where I can narrow it down to.
It'll not be live. Put it that way.
Yeah.
And then we can have a really good chat then a bit about more stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the juicier stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Lovely. So, I just need you to end it then, brother.
Okay,
let me know how you get on.
Stop sharing that for a start. Yep, I can end it.
Yeah.
Okay, dude.
It might, if it downloads to my computer, I'll text you straight away saying, you know, I'm getting it, but I've got a feeling it's going to go to yours.
Okay, well, I'll end it and see what it says, and I'll let you know on text.
All right, mate. Much appreciated, and thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Take care.
Pleasure as always, brother. Hey, cutie.